Welcome aboard, Giants fans, to episode 45 of Talk is Cheap, our New York Giants podcast on NJ.com. I'm Joe Giglio, joined as always by Jordan Renan and, of course, James Kratch. They cover the Giants for NJ Advanced Media after what was a pretty crazy week. Really, one crazy hour, it really felt like, when a free agency opened last Wednesday. Jordan, we knew the Giants would be active. They were. They spent a ton of money. And now we can react to the new players and where this franchise is right now. So before we get into all the names and kind of breaking it all down, just what did you think of the spending spree that happened? I know the moments and the news you guys broke happened over time, but when free agency opened, it was literally basically an hour when all this kind of went down.
Yeah, 1 hour into free agency, and they had their three substantial players. I mean, I'm not counting Jason Pierre-Paul because he was re-signed the day before. That's sort of a re-signing. They kind of brought one of their own guys back. To me, they went out there and they added, because obviously Jason Pierre-Paul was on the roster, kind of at least last year. So they added three outside pieces, all defense. And to me, this was the smart move. I mean, you had to add defensive pieces, defensive playmakers, and you're not going to go. The way to rebuild a team, I mean, first of all, you don't want to have to rebuild your team through free agency, but the way the Giants' defense was, they had to rebuild it partially through free agency. You don't want to go get 5 or 6 guys. 2 or 3 was the right number. You pick your 2 or 3 that you think are building blocks, that are guys that you can move forward with. And when you look at a guy like Vernon, you look at a guy like Janoris Jenkins, those to me are 2 pieces, 25, 27 years old, where you can say, okay, they're entering the better years of their career. Those guys are going to be on our defense for 4 or 5 years. Damon Harrison now too. So to me, I thought it was a good, smart approach. And now the Giants' defense, while still not good, is definitely better.
James, I think all 3 of us would have to agree. I think everyone listening would have to agree. The Giants had to spend money. They had to go out there and use this cap room and fill the holes they had. We've talked about that for weeks, for months, really dating back to last season. Now the question is going to become, from here through next season, did they get the right guys? Did Jerry spend the money on the right guys? When the names started coming in, what was your initial reaction to the names and the players they chose to spend this cap room on?
I mean, you talk about did he get the right guys. I mean, he can only get the guys that are on the market in their time of need, which is now. Janoris Jenkins, I think, surprised all of us. I don't know if anyone really saw him coming. That was kind of a very quiet acquisition by them, but he's a good cornerback. He was the best cornerback on the market, and obviously they felt they needed to move on from Prince and upgrade that position. The Harrison sign to me was interesting because, I know he said on the teleconference with us that 4-3-3-4, not a big difference for him, but you are bringing a guy who was really good at doing one thing, and you're going to have him do another thing. And then Vernon, obviously, I mean, we know that he was the top target from the start for the Giants. He was the guy they had to get because this all comes back to the pass rush and the fact that they couldn't get after the quarterback this past season, and that's why they were what they were. And he's the best young pass rusher on the market, so you got to do whatever you can to bring him in, and they did that.
Jordan, let's talk about Vernon first. Let's go to Olivier Vernon. He's the one that everyone's talking about, the contract, $85 million, and kind of putting him up there versus other defensive ends. We know money every year in the NFL and free agency, it goes up, so comparing him to a guy that signed 2 years ago, it's really not a fair comparison. But that number will be attached to him this year with expectations. I mean, you were someone, I remember during the end of last season, it was probably right around the time we did an episode or two around the Miami game, the Monday night game. You were talking about how good you thought Vernon was and how well he was playing at that point. What if Giants fans don't know a lot about this guy other than, he just got $85 million, he better come in here and produce. What do we have to know about him? The one thing that I think jumps out is he's not just a pass rusher. He does play the run well, too, which I think the Giants have always prioritized.
Yeah, he's a solid all-around player. I mean, look, the only way that good players at the age of 25, 26 become free agents is if your team is a disaster and you put yourself in a bad situation, either cap-wise or just stupidity, and you could put the Miami Dolphins in that category. I mean, they weren't in good shape with the cap. They're in the Sue signing. I mean, and plus, they're the organization that decided, okay, let's bring in Mario Williams and a bad, Byron Maxwell contract, and we're going to get rid of a 25-year-old solid, good player as a pass rusher, and we're going to get rid of our 25-year-old promising running back. I mean, that's just a bad franchise. You just have to have a team that just doesn't understand what this is all about. Teams don't let 25, 26-year-old successful players. When you talk about we're comparing them to deals 2 years ago, you're comparing them to a deal. I'm pretty sure what you were talking about there was basically J.J. Watt and those kind of guys.
Yep.
Those guys weren't free agents, though. When you hit the market, that's why you can't worry about the number of the money, because if you are in a position where you're lucky enough where your team has their back against the wall or just flat out not smart enough, and you're in the position where you're at a good age, still young, still entering your prime, and you're about to hit that free agent market, you're going to bank, and you're going to get more than you're worth. I shouldn't say that, because you are what you are on the market. Whatever the market says you are, that's what you're worth. But you're going to get more what people think you're worth. So the price, here's the bottom line. The price for a good defensive end, look, this isn't a Pro Bowl defensive end. He's never made a Pro Bowl yet. He's not an All-Pro. He's never made an All-Pro team. But the price for a good defensive end this year was $85 million, $17 million a year. That's what it's going to cost to get him. So is it worth for your team to get that guy? And for the Giants, the answer was yes. They needed someone that they could pencil in there for 4 or 5 years and say, this guy's going to be a significant guy on our defense for 4 to 5 years. Doesn't mean he's going to be the best player. He's not going to all of a sudden turn into an All-Pro. He's a good, solid player. Maybe he'll make a Pro Bowl or two. If he gets 8 to 10 sacks a year, I think everybody should go home happy. He doesn't need to be J.J. Watt. He'll never be J.J. Watt. He'll never be, name the best defensive end you could think of. So he'll never be that guy. There's nothing that says that's what this guy's going to be. But he's going to be he should be a good, solid player. And when you're talking about minimizing risk, and that's what you're paying the money for, he minimizes the risk because he checks off a lot of boxes. Healthy, young, talented. So that's why you pay what you pay for a guy like Olivier Vernon. To me, it was a smart move. It was the easy, no-brainer move because the Giants didn't have any defensive end on their roster that they could count on moving forward. Jason Pierre-Paul, even, he's a crapshoot. They know it. That's why he's on a one-year deal. But now they at least have someone that you know can be the guy as starting defensive end for them for the next 4 to 5 years.
James, I think a couple of weeks ago we talked about, as we were kind of previewing this whole process, we talked about the Giants they didn't have any building block players. Like, I think we were joking, like, who are their building block players outside of Eli and Beckham? But we were talking about the defensive side of the ball. Do you think they found that now? Do you think these guys are building block players? I mean, their age, as Jordan was just saying, their age kind of lends to they're going to be around a while and they should be still coming into their prime. So they can be that if they play well. Do you think the Giants got building blocks on defense now?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think they got guys that they can attempt to build with, obviously. And as Jordan said about the money, it's just money. Like, I don't understand why people get so bent out of shape about, first off, none of these contracts are fully guaranteed, so they're not necessarily going to give Olivier Vernon $85 million. And even if they do, it's not like baseball where this is going to, handcuff your budget if it doesn't work out going forward. It's a cap era. They're most 3-year deals. Usually you can get rid of the guy after that if you have to. The Giants hope they don't have to. But people freak out about the money. The money's not important. Yes, I do think they're building block guys. I mean, you have 2, actually 3, because, I think the Giants would hopefully assume that, okay, if we have Vernon and we have Snacks, and then we have Hankins and Snacks together, we'll hopefully get Hankins re-signed down the road. We have building blocks there. Still need to build a little bit in the linebacking core. You hope that Kennard can be that kind of player. And then you go back to the secondary, and you've got a cornerback who you hope can play corner for the next couple of years. So, yes, I do think they've acquired building block players, but they have to build around those players, and that's going to be the key going forward.
Still need one more. It's in the draft with that number 10 pick. They haven't invested in one since 2011 when they got Prince, who now they're allowed to walk. They need more. They need another guy in the draft that can turn into a real difference maker, a Pro Bowl, All-Pro type player. So that's their job, is to come out of that with that final, another piece. And then you have, like James said, you could even throw in Landon Collins in there too. So then you have basically building blocks at every level now, which would be nice. But linebacker is the one that they need. Linebacker is the spot that they need.
It is, and that will be, and we'll get into the under the radar linebacker they signed in a second here. But you mentioned Prince, Jordan, who went to the Jacksonville Jaguars, I believe, on a 1-year deal, and he was a former first-round pick. You just mentioned the last time they invested a first-round pick in a defensive player. What did you think about the decision to move away from Prince, I guess, or really move towards Janoris Jenkins, and not just that decision, but the financial difference. I mean, 1 year for Prince in Jacksonville compared to this gigantic deal for Jenkins. Do you think the difference in those players is worth the money? I mean, they clearly have to.
Yeah, I mean, they wanted to get tougher. They wanted to have a guy that they know is going to be out there and that's more reliable, so they decided to move on. The difference in price, personally, I mean, I would much rather have Prince for half the price than Janoris Jenkins. But they wanted to overhaul that roster, and I'm not going to sit here and complain that they wanted to get the person who they thought was the top cornerback. So if that's what they thought, and that's what they thought the price to get that guy was, then fine, go get it. Because look, he's a guy that's going to be there now for like we said, he's now their building block out there. 3, 4, 5 years. That's their guy at cornerback. Dominique Rodgers-Cromartie's not going to be here that much longer. He has a couple of years left on his deal, but his number is getting bigger and he's getting older. He has trouble staying in the lineup as well. So I wouldn't expect him to be here in 2, 3, 4 years. So their guy now, and at least you can count on him. And I see this is what we're talking about. You need building block players, and Jenkins is that guy. You don't know if Prince is that guy because he has trouble staying on the field.
All right. Now, with Jenkins there, the one thing that popped out to me, James, would be Jenkins, from when I've watched him when he was in St. Louis, and I guess they're Los Angeles, but when he was in St. Louis with the Rams, he's an aggressive corner. Cromartie is an aggressive corner, going for the football, trying to take it away. And then you look at the defensive line they've built, and you mentioned all the weight they have in the middle there with Hankins, with Harrison, and obviously Vernon could play the run, and JPP can too. All of last year we talked about the Giants don't have any identity on defense. They're just a bunch of guys out there. To me, right off the top, I see now they have 2 corners that are aggressive and want to take the ball away. And they should be able to have a good run stuffing front on defense with the defensive line. We'll see how good the pass rush will be with those guys. But do you think they're closer to having an identity now than they were, 2 weeks ago?
Oh, definitely. I mean, I think that, yes, you're going to have 2 quarterbacks that are going to be aggressive. I think there's also the downside of they might give up a bunch of big plays, which, as we know, was a issue for this team last year. But no, I think they have an identity that they hope they have a pass rush. They think they have a run stuffing unit. They have 2 good cornerbacks. Linebackers still kind of a big question mark, and it's going to be, I think, until we get through the rest of free agency and then to the draft. But no, they definitely have an identity, and I think we can say today they are better on paper than they were on January 3rd in the last game of the season. I don't know how much better, but I do think they are better. And I think the argument could be made by some that if they were just a little bit better last year, their season would have turned out much differently. I don't necessarily agree with that, but I think that's what they would say.
I just wrote this. I mean, we actually said it last year, too. The goal on defense, it should be, be respectable. 20th. Yeah, be respectable this year, and then next year you try and have an actual good unit. But again, the goal should be just to get to sort of the middle of the pack, and these moves should help them get there. I mean, if they're the 32nd ranked defense again, then you have to say, did they invest their money wisely? And I think you could probably say they probably didn't if they're 32nd again next year.
Yeah, I think a comparison probably to make, just considering the quarterbacks, they're both veterans. They've both been around since the same draft. I'm looking at the numbers right now. Pittsburgh last year, at least in yards, I mean, you could use whatever you want on defense, but at least in yards last year allowed, Pittsburgh was 21st. They made the playoffs because of their offense, because of when Big Ben was healthy, those receivers. I think that's kind of where you guys are going, right? If the Giants have a defense at least, towards that level, they have a chance to compete.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that's what I think the plan should be. You don't go from 32nd in a league to top 5 defense. That's just doesn't seem realistic to me.
No, it doesn't, and it probably isn't for them, but they've added these players. Now, the one that we haven't talked about because his contract was so much smaller and so much tinier and not with the same wave as the first 3 guys, Jordan, would be the addition of Keenan Robinson, a linebacker who I think is a pretty good player, but he always seems to have some sort of injury. What did you think about that? And is he the answer at middle linebacker, or is he just kind of thrown into the mix now?
Yeah, I think he's the answer for now. I mean, to me, it looks like they're gearing up to have Keenan Robinson as their starting middle linebacker now. You better have a good contingency plan. That's all I got to say for Keenan Robinson. I wonder if that contingency plan is Devon Kennard or J.T. Thomas in any way, shape, or form. I'm not so sure, but I would, you know what? It's a risky move. They got to find a way to solidify this position. It's such an important position on the defense. It's the leader of the defense. He's a little risky for my liking there. I mean, I understand there's not anything out there that you're wanting to pay an exorbitant amount for, but a 1-year guy who is injury prone and okay, we're going to go into a season with that guy as our middle linebacker. I was hoping that this team would go something a little more known and solid than that, and it didn't happen. I mean, the price for a guy like Jarrell Freeman, who's a guy who played for very successfully and well for the Colts, was not that outrageous. I think that could have been a move that they looked at, but they didn't go that direction.
James, what did you think of the Robinson thing? I mean, I think on this show, at least, you're the one that always seems to want to navigate the conversation towards linebackers and how much of an issue it is, which I think every Giants fan.
Brinkley.
Right, and that's what I was going to say.
Yeah.
Guy Brinkley. But what did you think about Robinson, who, I mean, the list, pectoral, shoulder, ribs, knee, it seems like this guy's had every single injury in his 4 years in the NFL you could have, when he's not on the field.
Yeah, no, I think I said on a comment or a tweet to a reader, like, if a guy hits free agency, he usually has a red flag somewhere.
Or, like Jordan was saying a few minutes ago, his team, like the Vernon thing, flubbed it.
Yeah, just a complete disaster. So, I agree with Jordan. It's a big risk. They have to have a contingency plan. And right now, unless, for all we know, as Jordan said, they might have decided J.T. Thomas or Devon Kennard as a contingency plan. It doesn't look like they have one.
Sounds like a bad plan to me, though.
It's just not good. I mean, and that's sort of becoming like a recurring, from at least from my time covering the Giants, like last year, it's like, well, they really didn't have a contingency plan at free safety or at wide receiver, and now, like, if you're going to go into this year without a contingency plan at middle linebacker, it's just, but I mean, the idea of signing Robinson, I don't really have a problem with. It's low risk, high reward, not giving him a lot of money. It's a 1-year deal. If the guy can stay healthy, great. If you just said, all right, we're not going to sign guys who have injury histories, then I don't know if we'd be able to fill up 53-man rosters across the league. But Jordan's right. They have to have some sort of solid backup plan in place because history shows that there's a very good look, Robinson could stay he could have the healthiest season he's ever played, I think, and he still could miss 2 or 3 games. So
yeah, I think you're right. I think maybe 13 or 14 is the most he's ever played in the season.
They have to have some sort of contingency plan, and Kennard.
It just feels like Beeson again, doesn't it? A little bit. I mean, I understand. Beeson was a little more proven and stuff, but it just has that same feeling, like, okay, it could work, but it could also be a complete disaster.
Yes, it definitely has that, like, this could be really good feeling, or it could be a complete mess, and a guy could be hurt by training camp, and you're sitting there looking around, and you're just doing the whole thing over again.
All we got to do is keep him healthy, just a little bit. All he has to do is stay healthy, but it's not that easy. This is a physical game, and especially at that position. Now, the one thing I do like about that, I will say this, is the fact that if they have those 2 big guys occupying offensive linemen, I like the idea of having a guy who can run around and make plays at that next level, and I think Robinson might be a guy that can do that, if healthy, obviously. So you do like that part of it.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think his skill set makes sense. Like you're saying, behind Harrison and behind Jonathan Hankins, I mean, he should have a lot of room to run around and make a bunch of tackles, and if he's healthy, I think maybe they found a steal there. So we have Olivier Vernon, we have Damon Snacks Harrison, we have Janoris Jenkins, Keenan Robinson, Jason Pierre-Paul re-signed. That was last week for the Giants, and now seemingly everyone that's around the team and pays attention to the team wants to know where this team goes next. So here's what we'll do now, and then we'll wrap this up by kind of placing the Giants where you think they are in the NFC East after the beginning of free agency. But let's go to the positions they didn't address, or maybe didn't address enough. So Jordan, for you, of the needs
or yet, just didn't address
or yet.
it.
That's right, or yet. I mean, we're doing this podcast on a Tuesday. It's only been, 6 days since the spending spree, so maybe a second wave of free agency, or, of course, the draft coming up in less than 50 days. So they have some time here to address these needs. What's the first, like, where's your mind going, Jordan, of what's next or what should be next of the needs they have?
Offensive line, to me, is an area that they're looking at, and you see them poking around, trying to find somebody. They can't go into the season with their right side of their line starting, possibilities or options being Marshall Newhouse, John Jerry, and Bobby Hart. Just not good enough. They need another veteran starter, whether it's at guard or tackle. One of those two spots. We've said it since the beginning. So to me, that's up there. Wide receiver, too. They need something at wide receiver. There's not that much left. Ruben Randall's out there. I have a hard time seeing that happen, that kind of reunion. So I think what they're going to be stuck doing is getting a veteran guy and, plugging him in there as a possession receiver opposite Beckham for 1 year and hoping they could, get by with that and cross their fingers and maybe Cruz will come back or, they'll get more from Dwayne Harris and Jeremy Davis. So those two spots, they need to address the offense a little bit. I would love for them to get free safety, and that was definitely a position of need last year, but I could see why it's a little lower on the priority list because at least they have some guys there. We don't know if any of them can play, but you hope that one of those three guys, between Bennett Jackson, Nat Burhay, and who's the third, Michael Thompson, all draft picks. You hope that between one of those three, one of them is good enough to play, and you can get something out of one of them. And so I understand you can't fill all those needs in one offseason. I just finished writing something where it's Tuesday right now as we're taping this. I just finished writing something about why the Giants and Jerry Reese aren't anywhere near done because in my estimation, this is a 2-year plan. There was too many needs to address in one offseason that some of them are going to have to come next year and that the goal should be, playoffs this year, serious contender next year. So you can only pick and choose how many spots you're going to address in one offseason. So to me, I understand why free safety is not at the top of the list.
Yeah, that's a good point. And once George Iocca went back to the Bengals, there really weren't many young free safeties out there that a lot of people really liked. Weddle, that we talked about a couple of weeks ago, he went to Baltimore, but he was a guy looking for a win-now team, and maybe it just wasn't the right fit for either
The Giants just weren't in on that one. It was just one they just weren't getting in. They weren't getting in on any of these top veteran safeties. This wasn't their plan.
So that, to me, kind of goes right into what you were saying, Jordan, that it's more of a 2-year plan than a one, because if it's just a one, then go get Eric Weddle or, go get the best available guy at each position. James, for you, the next move, what should it be? And what's the hole that kind of looks at you and says, man, they have to do something here, whether it be the second tier of free agency or early in the draft?
I definitely think that offensive line is really important. Jordan's right. They have to get something because even if you I think John Jerry's proven, he's a proven commodity. You know what you're going to get out of him. And even if you think that Bobby Hart can play, it's just to go into camp with those three guys that Jordan mentioned, being your guys on the right side, it's a little risky. But at the same time, I think that receiver is a big issue. But I look at the market, and I don't really see anybody that makes sense for the Giants right now, assuming they're not going to bring back Ruben Randall, which I just can't fathom occurring. Stranger things have happened, but it just doesn't seem to me that there's anyone real out there. So I would say definitely focus on getting a lineman in free agency. You need to have a veteran there. But then everything else, I think it's just kind of, complementary signings, this kind of value signings, and you got to turn to the draft because it seems like a lot of these areas where we think that we project needs for the Giants, there's not really anything left now.
What do you think about Anquan Boldin? We talked about this, I know, once before, but I think at this point, to me, it makes the most sense. You get the veteran guy to sort of chirp in Odell's ear. He worked with the new wide receivers coach, Adam Henry, in San Francisco. Sure. He's supposed to be a great locker room guy. I don't know how much he has left either. But I think at this point, that's the kind of move that seems to make the most sense to me. Just try and get by again in 1 year, and then you address it again next year.
That's a good point.
I love the idea. And James, I think you and I spoke about it when you were in the office a couple weeks ago, that Anquan Boldin's game never really was reliant on speed. So he's a guy that, I bet if you clocked him in a 40 now, you'd say that guy can't be a wide receiver. But that was never him. I think when he came out of the draft all those years ago, everyone was saying, "Oh wow, his 40 time's really slow." And then he went out there
He ran like a 4.8 or something.
Yeah, and then he had 100 catches as a rookie. So I almost look at him and say, he'll find a way to get open and make a tough catch in traffic. I like the idea.
No, he's a guy that they definitely could sign. Assuming that if he doesn't want to, if he gets an offer elsewhere, or the Giants don't want to bring in. I think he's 35 going on 36. Just to me, it seems like he's probably the one guy they could go after. But after that, it seems like the wide receiver market is just kind of, it passed them by. And look, they address needs on defense when guys like Sanu and Jones were getting big deals elsewhere. I understand that.
They were in on Jones. They were in on that.
They were in on him. Obviously, they just got outbid by the Lions. But, it just seems to me that offensive line is the main focus in free agency, and in everything else, it's kind of value signings or the draft, or you wait for someone to shake free down the line.
And that's probably what they're doing here. Now, Jordan, I know you guys had reported that Russell Okung was in for a visit last week. Now, we're doing this podcast on a Tuesday. His free agency might end at some point. But just the idea of them bringing in a tackle that has played left tackle in the NFL, do you think that signals that the idea of them signing a offensive lineman could happen here at some point? I mean, I'm looking at the list of guys available. There are some veterans out there that, there are some decent names. I mean, Andre Smith, Russell Okung. There's some guys that have played in the league and played right or left tackle for a while that you would think would fit if the Giants were interested.
Yeah, don't expect them in on Andre Smith. He hasn't played well the last couple of years and has had some previous injuries. That's one I've told that they weren't involved in at all. But, Okung, Donald Penn, Kelvin Beachum, veteran guys like that, I think it's something that the Giants are going to look into. What the most interesting part of that is they bring in a veteran guy who's played left tackle, right? Mm-hmm. Does that guy really want to come to the Giants, or is that a guy that you can, that you could say, well, why don't you go move to the right side so Eric Flowers could play on the left? Eric Flowers was a rookie last year. He wants to play on the left. He's not really that. I wouldn't say willing is the right word, but he's not dying to go play on the right side. That's not something he wants to do. So, you're going to say, hey, Russell Okung, you played left tackle. But, you come here, you go play right tackle because we got Eric Flowers. That's not exactly a great selling point. So it'll be interesting to see how that kind of works if when they do bring in a guy who's been a left tackle in the past. And I think it's a definite possibility. A strong possibility, I should say.
Yeah, that's a good point. And then, Flowers, top 10 pick last year, and I'm sure they'd want to try to keep developing him at left tackle and then work out that way.
But he wasn't great at left tackle.
No, he wasn't.
Let's be honest.
But it felt like he was rushed into having to be that, right, as a rookie?
So wouldn't it make sense to put him at right tackle for a little bit?
I agree. So, I'm just not sure that do they want to do that.
What did Lane Johnson do in Philadelphia?
He
played right for a couple of years. The plan is eventually to move him to the left, but he got to sort of ease in. He wasn't great his first couple of years either, but he got to ease in.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's they were going to have him as the right tackle. Then Beatty gets hurt, so he plays left. He struggles, and they decide to be adamant and say he's the left tackle going forward. And now you have all these left tackles on the market, and you're going to want to move him to. It's kind of a strange situation.
Here's the question: who would be a better left tackle this year? Russell Okung, who we don't know with his injuries, or Eric Flowers. And I think that's the decision the Giants have to make: is what's best for our team. Like, if you look at their team, though, what would be the best solution in your mind? My mind, it would be with Flowers on the right and whichever one of these guys who has played left tackles on the left, if that's who they sign.
Yes,
I'd agree.
So we're across the board. We're agreeing that that's their best unit. So, for them to go out there and say he's definitely our left tackle seems to be a mistake.
Yeah, that probably would be. And we'll see where they go and how this whole offseason plays out, what they do at tackle for the rest of this, I guess, the second wave of free agency here. All right, before we get into how all this affects the draft and if it did at all, from both of you, how do you think do you think the NFC East hierarchy changed the first week? Look, it's just the first week of free agency, and we've seen a lot of teams over the years spend a lot of money, and it does not make a big impact on the next season. But in the NFC East, you had two teams that were very active, the Giants, of course, and the Eagles. And then two teams that weren't as active, the Dallas Cowboys and the team that won it last year, the Washington Redskins. How has the NFC East in each of your minds changed, if at all? We'll start with James on this one.
I don't know if I can say it's changed that much. I mean, I still think that, Washington and Dallas, I think, have to be considered the two top contenders on paper. And I guess the Giants and the Eagles, I mean, I would say right now the Giants might have a slight edge on the Eagles, but I don't think it's a big valley by any stretch of the imagination. So that's where I would put it. I would put the Redskins just because, they won the division last year. They have they got their quarterback situation taken care of, at least in the short term. And in Dallas, because once Romo's back, I think they're a different team. And I would put the Giants and Eagles that next, maybe a step behind. But I think it's going to be a competitive division again.
Well, by competitive, you mean nobody being good?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, I don't know. Maybe someone will win 10 or 11 games this year, but
I don't know. I mean, I look at that right now, and you say, oh, yeah, when Romo comes back, well, if it's me, I'm a little concerned about Romo. If I'm a Cowboys fan, I'm crossing my fingers, sure, but he's 36 years old, has a history of back injuries, and his collarbone is made of plastic or whatever now. It's cracking left and right. So, I think the Cowboys have the best potential. I think the Redskins kind of maybe maxed out last year. I don't see them getting much better. It's not like they have a great young team around Kirk Cousins. I mean, a lot of these guys were kind of older, and their defense wasn't great in the first place. So I don't know. To me, it's still a big mishmash, and the Eagles again are the complete wild card. Who knows? I mean, they did such an overhaul again. They got rid of everything that Chip Kelly kind of assembled, except for Sam Bradford, which remains a huge question mark, as we see on our site from our Eagles guys every day. The Sam Bradford talk is never going to end. So to me, it's a big mishmash. Everybody's right in there in the probable 8-8 range. So much the same as last year. I guess I would put the Redskins as the favorites. I like the moves that their general manager has been making the last couple of years, ever since he took over. I think that they're headed in the right direction, but I don't see them as being significantly improved right now. So they're the best of a bunch of mediocre teams.
I think that's fair. I think that's a fair way to describe it. The Redskins probably the best of mediocre teams. The one thing I'd say is, because you guys were going through the quarterbacks and the teams, I mean, that has to make the Giants, I mean, it should make them feel good every year, but it has to make the Giants feel good. They spent all this money on defense, and they have to know they walk into next season with the most, maybe sure thing or stability at quarterback. Because you mentioned Romo. Who knows if that collarbone will ever stay healthy. We have to see Cousins do it again, even though he was very impressive last year. And Bradford is just like the ultimate question mark for 8 years now. So the Giants, at least they know they have that. They've improved the team, and they have the quarterback you probably bet the most on for next season.
As the bearer of bad news is they had that quarterback the last 4 years, too, when they didn't make the playoffs, in the last 3 when they had finished with a losing record. It makes me think of James. You wrote that piece
last week, that the Giants have to have a sense of urgency here with Eli's, his age getting up there in his mid-30s, and Jordan just made a good point. They've kind of wasted good years from Eli now.
They didn't break it down when they should have. Like 2-3 years ago is when they should have broken it all down, started to rebuild it back up.
They should have, and now maybe they'd be in better position to go, put a Super Bowl team around him one last time. All right, before we wrap up here, has the NFL draft strategy changed at all based on what the Giants did in free agency, or is it still the same in your mind what the Giants should or shouldn't do come late April? James, we'll start with you and then wrap up with Jordan.
I don't think it's changed much. I still think that best defensive player on the board, preferably at defensive end or maybe cornerback if Hargreaves is there, that's got to be their pick at 10, I would still assume. I don't think they're going to take an offensive lineman that high again, and I don't think they're going to take Ezekiel Elliott, although half the world seems to want to make that happen. So my guess is still they take a pass rusher or a defensive back at 10.
Yeah, I don't think it's changed much. It's going to be the best defensive player on their board, in my opinion. If they're the luckiest team in the world, maybe it'll be Miles Jack. Vernon Hargraves, or if all those guys are gone, Leonard Floyd is a name to keep your ears open for. Explosive player that they can use maybe as a Sam linebacker, put him on the line on passing downs. I think that's sort of the way this is leaning. It was that way, and I don't think anything has changed. Top defensive player. Look, they haven't invested in it. You got to invest. These are your young guys. These are the guys you get for cheap. And they wouldn't be in this spot if they had some good young defensive players that they were able to build around. But things have happened with Jason Pierre-Paul over the last couple of years, and then they didn't bring Prince back. Those were the two guys they invested in 10 and 11. Didn't end up bringing them back at the same form that they were, or at least that they hoped, because we know what happened with JPP. So they need to get that guy now so that they can have defensive building block, but at a rookie price, and that's basically what you need on both sides of the ball. It's what they have on offense right now. They have Beckham, Richburg, Pugh, Flowers, all guys that are substantial players playing at rookie deal prices. They need that on defense.
It's a good point. Find that core guy at a cheap price, put him around the veterans, and you have a quarterback, and maybe that's a way you go there for the Giants.
Yeah, you have those guys for 4 or 5 years and making them, $1 million or whatever it is, or less.
Oh, yeah. Such an advantage, especially if they do, pan out to be a Pro Bowl type of player. I mean, that's the money you're saving there. It's invaluable.
Right. Then you could overpay at other positions. That's sort of the give and take. But if you don't have any guys that are in that spot on defense, then you have to overpay for a whole bunch of guys, which is the situation they were in now.
Yep, and they keep doing that, and eventually that comes back to bite you. But for 1 year, the Giants did spend big, a ton of money last week, the most expensive group in free agency the Giants have ever brought together, and now we'll see how the rest of this offseason pans out. So we'll be back soon with another episode. We'll look forward to the rest of the offseason, the NFL draft. A lot of that talk will be coming up on our future episodes here, and of course, whatever the Giants do in the second wave of free agency. Jordan, thanks as always for doing this.
Anytime, Joe. I'll be at the owners' meetings the end of this week into next week. So, any questions? We'll attack those on that we want to ask John Mara or Steve Tisch, the two owners, or even Jerry Reese. He'll be there as well, and we'll get a sit down with Ben McAdoo. So we'll get a little more direction on where this team is heading and what their plan actually is.
Well, the next time we get together, we'll definitely kind of unpack whatever you find out and whatever you hear from Ben McAdoo down there. So we'll do that, and we'll talk to you guys coming up soon. Thanks, James.
You got it, Joe. Thank you.
And thanks to all of you for listening to episode 45 of Talk is Cheap. Make sure to sign up on iTunes, on Stitcher, SoundCloud, or however you want to listen. You can listen to Talk is Cheap, our New York Giants podcast, right here on NJ.com.